COAs, which has taken 11 months plus to get approved. You had to have a 28-page CONOPS, and all this stuff would go in, and it would take 11 months.
Charles, you had mentioned there is a significant breakthrough with the new DFR, COA, and other COAs.
Well, we now have proof from at least 2 agencies, both being approved in 1 week. 1 week. Hats off to the FAA for making these changes, because every day that we got delayed, our opportunities of us missing to save lives.
How would the new system empower more agencies to implement or scale their drone programs?
Well, a lot of people have asked me.
Welcome to DroneCast, rethinking public safety one drone at a time, a podcast by DroneSense. We explore real-world applications of drones in emergency response, offering a close examination of evolving trends in drone technology and its impact on public safety. I'm your host, Joe Kearns, Strategic Partnership Manager here at DroneSense. And hey, as you're listening, I'd love to hear from you. Maybe there's a story or a challenge from your own experience that resonates, or is there a topic you'd like me to cover in future episodes? Reach out to us on LinkedIn by searching for DroneCast, rethinking public safety one drone at a time, or visit dronesense.com/DroneCast to share your thoughts. Your feedback helps shape the show, and you might just inspire our next episode. Now, let's dive into today's conversation on advancing public safety through drones. Welcome to DroneCast. Today, we're honored to have Charles Werner with us, one of the most influential voices in public safety drone space. Charles has had an extensive background spanning over 4 decades in emergency services and aviation. He began his career as a fire chief, leading into high-stakes environments, and later transitioned into technology leadership, integrating drones, AI, and robotics in public safety operations. Charles currently serves as the Aviation Technology Adviser for the Virginia Department of Aviation, helping to guide integration of unmanned aerial systems into public safety across the state. He's also the director of Drone Responders, a global alliance dedicated to advancing drones in emergency services. Today, we'll be discussing his remarkable career, the impact of drones in public safety, and the recent breakthrough in DFR COA process, and the exciting future of drone technology and law enforcement. Welcome to DroneCast, Charles. It's great to have you.
Glad to be here. Very exciting news.
Awesome. I'm so excited to get a chance to have this episode with you. You've already been a guest on our podcast, and I'm sure you're going to be a guest here on DroneCast again. So it's just great to have you. So awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get in some opening questions here. Charles, with over 4 decades of experience in emergency services and aviation, how does your journey into aviation start, and what drew you into this field?
Well, technology has been a big part of my career throughout. So I've been involved in thermal image cameras, GIS, GPS, you name it, I've been involved in it. So as I was getting closer to retirement as fire chief, I started seeing the drones kind of popping up and started looking. And as I started exploring it, I think the first article I wrote, I thought there'd be 7 use cases for public safety drones. And now we've seen later over 50 public safety use cases for drones. So it's amazing to see how that's all gone forward. And what's really interesting is the convergence now of all this technology. So we've got drones, we've got connectivity and broadband, we've got video streaming, we've got artificial intelligence, and now we're seeing the convergence of robotics in general, looking at ground robotics combined with aerial robotics, and in marine robotics, it may be all operating together at a major incident where all 3 of these environments exist.
That's awesome. Now you're already talking about a dream to see it happen, and a dream that's becoming a reality where it's land, sea, and air all coming together. I love that.
Yeah, and we're seeing that. We're seeing departments now change from a UAS program to robotics. If you look at Austin Fire Department, they have a robotics program, one of the first ones in the country, and FDNY is doing something so.
Nice. And that's so true. It's not, like, drone is not the term anymore. It is robotics. Because soon we'll have Optimus robots walking around and like all the different things, right?
Yes, it's going to be kind of crazy.
That's awesome. Now, you made a significant shift in operational leadership to technological innovation in public safety. What sparked your transition from fire chief to working with drones, AI, and robotics in emergency services?
Well, as I said, I was already involved in technology through my career, so it was just a natural transition. The drones just really drew me to them as I started seeing the technology. And I never will forget, one of the first things, I was also working at the Virginia Department of Emergency Management after I retired. And I had a friend who had a drone, and we had tornadoes. And so I was near my neighborhood, and he said, "Hey, let's go fly the tornadoes." And okay, let's go. So we went, and I had this imagery, and I was reaching back to the Department of Emergency Management and said, "Hey, I've got these images of the tornado." And I'm like, "Look, we're really busy. We're really busy." And I said, "You don't understand. I've got these pictures of the actual damage." And they're like, "We're really busy. We're really busy." And so finally I said, "Look, tell me where to send these photographs. I'm going to send them to you now." And so they said, "Okay, send them." Well, about 2 minutes later, "You have more photos? Can you send more of what you got? Can you go over here and look at these places?" So that was that moment of seeing the value. And then similarly, I was working as the acting deputy state coordinator at VDEM. And we had one of our local drone teams that had become a regional asset for the state. And they had a marina fire. And I saw it and I said, this would be an interesting test case for us to get the York County Fire and Life Safety Department to put their drone to go down. So I reached out. I knew the deputy chief at Henrico County Fire and said, "Hey, listen, can we come down and just do this as kind of a test case?" And I went, "Sure, come on down." So we got down there and we started flying, and they already told us that we've got a fixed wing and a helicopter already flying. So I'm not sure that's going to be much value. I said, "Okay, well, we just want to do it as a proof of concept." So we came in and we started flying. Well, the marina was damaged to the point where you couldn't really see in it and everything. So we start flying low. We start getting these high resolution photos, and it's starting to stream. And they're going, wait a minute, can you fly over here? Can you fly over there? Wait a minute, we're seeing water contamination from the boats up here. We've got to put some devices in place to contain the pollution. And then the fire investigator came over and stood beside us and said, "Hey, can you fly in the marina? Can we take a look at this? Can you tell us what's going on?" They said, "Okay, the fixed wing and helicopter, you can leave. We don't need you anymore," which led to Henrico County Fire starting their drone program. So it's just one thing led to another, but it was all about doing the proof of concept, showing the value and letting people actually see and feel it.
Charles, that's awesome. I love hearing the aha moments in drone technology, and so many of these moments that bring this tech into operation, and love hearing that. And also, we'll add that into the beginning as a storm chaser as well into your introductions, I think. Well, good stuff. Well, hey, so let's get into the big topic today. So, Charles, you had mentioned there is a significant breakthrough with the new DFR, COA, and other COAs. Can you walk us through the key changes in regulation, why this is considered such a game changer for public safety drone operations?
Yeah, well, it's a very significant change. We have been having these conversations with the FAA, specifically me on behalf of the Drone Responders, Drone as a First Responder Working Group, which now has over 200 members, and most of the agencies that have DFR programs or agencies that are looking at getting to DFR programs. So one of the things we've learned and seen is that the FAA does things new to different departments that we don't all hear about. Well, we do now, because as soon as something happens, the group is notified, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But what's happened is we specifically, this is the most impact is with drones of first responder programs, because we have been working on getting COAs, which is a certificate of authorization, which has taken 11 months plus to get approved. Now, what was happening, the FAA, in all fairness, was trying to kind of evaluate emerging technologies. But unfortunately, the FAA does not have the resources or the expertise to really validate and quote unquote approve or disapprove of technology, nor should they. So what happened was we actually had a conversation where we got to transitioning and getting out of that emerging technology evaluation. So now it's more of a self-certification to where the companies will define their performance parameters so we can use that to determine how the ConOps fits from a department. That's the basis what made the change. Now, so what's changed? You used to have to go into an email to 91.113 and you would do your BVLOS first. And then you would have to go into CAPS and you'd have to do all this extensive stuff. And you had to have a 28-page ConOps, and all this stuff would go in and it would be reviewed by a group, and it would take 11 months. Well, since then, you now send an email with 4 documents to an email address at Flight Standards, and they review it. It's a much simpler ConOps. You answer a questionnaire. You indicate how you're going to operate, and you do a very brief ConOps, like 3 paragraphs. If you're spending more than 1 page, you've taken too much time to submit it. And then if you're going to do any detect and avoid technology, there's what's called a CMD DAA form that tells about the technology itself, so they can look to see what does the technology say it can do, what's your ConOps look like, and they compare it. And then you have to submit a public safety organization letter just validating you're a public safety organization. and the functions that you're going to do very briefly. And then the other thing you want to send in is your PDL, your public declaration letter that says you're a public entity, and that most of these places already have public declaration letters. But if you don't, we can help you get through that process as well. And so then they review it. And so something that was a very extensive, a very long CONOPS, it would take consultants to have to write the CONOPS, and all this other stuff that would be submitted now can be done fairly easily with these 4 documents. So let's talk about the change. What has happened? Well, we now have proof from at least 2 agencies, one at 200 feet and one at 400 feet, both being approved in 1 week. 1 week from 11 months. Once the news got out, I put a LinkedIn notice of the breakthrough. In a week, I had 25,000 impressions of that announcement on LinkedIn.
That was one of me. I mean, I remember sharing that and talking to everyone about it. We were all just blown away.
So what makes it easier? So there's 2 different angles. So one, if you don't have any special technology, because you're going to fly above 200 feet, you can fly at 200 feet, AGL, or within 50 feet of the highest obstacle, and have ADS-B only receiver, which are relatively inexpensive. And that means you don't have to have any other kind of technology, and you can operate within your CONOPS provided that your ADS-B is capturing the information for where you're going to be flying. You don't get into specifics as the actual launch locations anymore. It's that simple. It's what's the operation, and how are you going to operate, and what's the technology going to be. Now, if you want to go above 200 feet, now you have to have a detect and avoid technology. And that's what the CMD DAA form does. And that probably is going to require some help from the company providing the technology. But that will tell the parameters of performance. And that's the self-certification, if you will, for lack of a better term, on that technology. And then the person on the reviewing end looks at that and says, okay, here's the CONOPS. They've asked the questions. I've looked at that. Make sure when you get the questionnaire, answer all the questions. And I know on our blog, we have the documents that are there for you to get. But the 400 feet then goes in. But both 200 and 400 feet were both approved in 1 week. I heard very shortly thereafter that from a trickle of applications, the FAA received over 20 applications in 1 day for DFR. Now, there's also something else that changed. What was kind of a precursor to this. Under Part 107, we never had a DFR waiver. Now there is a Part 107 DFR waiver. But as John Meehan would say to everyone, DFR means 11 different things to 11 different people in the FAA. So let's get away from that. And it was, what do you want to waive? BVLOS, 1. Okay. Number 2, operations over people. And number 3, operations over moving vehicles. So if you are flying with ADS-B, if you're flying with an anti-collision light, if you have a parachute or a prop guard, depending on the size of aircraft, a parachute or prop guard, one or the other, you can get this approved DFR, which was done for the first one, October of 2024, with Fort Wayne Police Department in Indiana. They were the first one that broke the ice on the DFR Part 107, and it was approved in 5 weeks. And they were still in 11th month cycle for the COA that they'd applied for the exact same thing that they got under Part 107 DFR waiver.
That's incredible. I'm already thinking about this. Like, how do you see the envision of the expansion of DFR, drone as first responder, programs across the country? How would the new system empower more agencies to implement or scale their drone programs?
Well, a lot of people have asked me, do you think that money or cost is the problem for departments not doing it? And that hasn't been the problem. The problem has been the regulations. Is that we've had departments in a process of 11 months to come back and their leadership say, do we really want to keep doing this? Are we going to get through this, or should we just put it aside? So now that these regulations have changed, we've already seen the exponential increase. But what happens now is as more departments see the advantages, because what happens? Well, departments are able to use this to operate safer. Drone as a first responder gives you eyes on a situation and for law enforcement before they arrive on the scene, which is very important. That changes, which I'll just say right off the bat has served as one of the biggest de-escalators in the toolbox. So the second thing is it means you're making better operational decisions. You're more effective because you're making decisions on information you didn't have otherwise. And then you're getting this real-time situational awareness of video streaming. And with DroneSense and other companies, you can have that magic link that gives a link to whomever you've assigned it to be able to see that live video streaming taking place as it happens. So if it's a commander, if it's a SWAT team leader, if it's an elected official that you want to have into a very tense situation, they can see that now. And all these things combined, we're saving lives. There's nothing more powerful than the video from Chula Vista when they have the vehicle fire on I-5 and they're flying. They get conflicting information as to location. Within about 30 seconds, the drone has identified exact location. And because they could see the involvement of fire, Chula Vista dispatched their units to I-5, which they don't go to because it's California Highway Patrol, but they told them to go anyway, the sergeant. They got there, switch over to body camera to show the breaking the back window. A person is in this heavily involved vehicle fire, and they literally pull the person out without a second to spare. As soon as that person's out, the vehicle is fully involved, all captured on video. So anybody that hasn't seen it, look up Chula Vista vehicle fire, and you will see it. But it's saving lives like that. And there's so many more of these new stories that we're hearing every single day.
That's amazing. I've said this before, but I love seeing that the reality we're in right now and the merging technology and now like implemented technology and regulated implemented technology and science fiction is all coming together in one. And it's just amazing to be a part of this. I love it.
And we're at the very fringe of artificial intelligence. We haven't seen everything. And now we're seeing with this new process that it looks to me like, and what I've heard so far is that the technology can do it. They're going to allow one-to-many aircraft flights, which means one remote pilot can operate multiple aircraft, multiple incidents at the same time and be watching them and monitoring all the aircraft. Or you can have one continuous mission where the aircraft goes out and is monitoring the overwatch, and then the second one goes out and is sitting in place before the first one comes back. So sky's the limit, or not.
Sky's the limit. Or the sea's the limit, where we were with land ski air. No, we'll get into that.
Space is the limit? I don't know. But the bottom line is we now have got all these opportunities in ways we'd never imagined before. And hats off to the FAA for making these changes, because I've said it before, every day that we got delayed for approval of these applications, of these waivers, are opportunities of us missing to save lives.
Well, let's dive into that. I know the FAA has played a pivotal role in simplifying the process, especially by consolidating approvals into this single review. How have you seen the FAA's role evolve in supporting public safety drone use, and what challenges remain for them in this space?
Well, I think so we in public safety we deal with risks every day. So we figure out how do we respond to the emergency we have and mitigate the risks as best we can. In aviation, their role is to make sure, the FAA is to make sure that the national airspace is safe, but also that the people on the ground are safe. And I remember when I went to the first IPP meeting with Chula Vista, and we were trying to get the tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver through. And I remember one of the FAA said, well, you covered the airspace. We got that, but we still have to worry about the ground space. And I said, well, in these situations, you don't. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, because we control the perimeter of these incidents. We're now in charge. And that was the breakthrough. So it's part of it is them understanding what is the value proposition, what's the good aspect of this, and how do we mitigate the risk? So what also has changed is we now have statistics. So when we first started having these conversations, it becomes a trust issue between the FAA and public safety. Okay, we know you guys, firefighters used to run in burning buildings, police officers used to running into places where people are shooting at them, but we don't like either one of those situations. So how do we deal with that? So now we have statistics that show that the chance of a drone and general aircraft aviation crash is 10 to the minus 7. That's 1 in 10 million. We know that a drone crash on another drone is 1 to 2.3 million. So for the first time, we now have statistics that the FAA never had from the beginning. So they were really guessing. And since their job is to maintain safety in national airspace, they really had to do it in such a way that they were overly conservative at the beginning. Now, what we're also seeing that's really important is with airports. We're now working and having conversations with airports to change their facility map grids. So it will change them for the overly conservative map grids they put in place and open up the airspace more so. So unless it's in an approach or a departure, then we can now have more operational advantages than we did before. And that's moving forward.
Nice. Now, you had noticed the process has got approval time from 10 months to several weeks. What kind of impact do you think this will have in public agencies all across it in terms of real-time operational effectiveness and especially emergency operations?
Well, there's a couple of things that go along with that. One, people have seen already the value of what it does of giving that knowledge before they arrive. And in these DFR programs, we've seen that 25% of the time, on average for most of the programs, it's returning ground units to service before they arrive on the scene. So it means you're putting a unit back in service to respond to calls, and this is really important, especially in departments that are short-staffed. So it serves as a force multiplier. Does it save money? No, it doesn't save money. It does eliminate positions? No, it doesn't eliminate positions. It gives you a bird's eye view of situations that can change in a very life-saving way. Chula Vista had a report of a man with a gun, and the drone got there first and did a zoom in and showed that it was a cigarette lighter gun. Now, if the officers had continued to go in with that mindset, given today's environment, and the guy turns and has the gun pointed to him, he's dead. And now we have them already on. It changes it. They walk in and say, look, you need to put that away. You need to move away. That video is also captured and on the Chula Vista website. So it's that game changer. But what you're seeing is all these departments saying, one of the big holdups was before the technology detect and avoid, we were having to have a remote pilot, a visual observer on a roof. Well, a visual observer on a roof is not very reliable, but it was a requirement.
And more expensive too, right?
Yeah, more expensive because you got salaries of all the positions that be up there. But the attention span of a person, distractions, and then weather, extreme cold or hot, makes it impossible to do. Now the departments are saying, I can do this, if nothing else, at 200 feet without expensive technology and be doing it in a week. That's a huge difference.
Quick break to highlight whether you're flying, sharing, or managing your drone program, DroneSense has everything you need. It's hardware agnostic, so it works with a variety of drones, sensors, and other hardware, giving you ultimate flexibility. And with the ability to collaborate across agencies securely, DroneSense helps you scale from one drone to 100 plus, supporting you in everything from routine calls to disaster response. To learn more and get started, check out the link in the description. Now, I want to bring this up again. We were chatting before this episode, and I love this. Now, COA, or COA, is now switching to COW? COW? Are we calling it COW? What are we calling it, Charles?
We're calling it a cow. That's right.
We're calling it COW. All right.
We have flying cows now.
Love it.
So originally certificate of authorizations, and they were called certificates of authorization because they were coming through and finally signed off with the air traffic operations, which was the authorization of the airspace. Now they've gone to a COW because they're being reviewed and approved by flight standards, and a flight standards doesn't give authorizations. So it's a certificate of waiver, but it's a little bit more because now what they've done is ATO, instead of being a second review process and then giving the airspace authorization, they have already approved the airspace authorization with this waiver, so it becomes a COWA, a COWA, because it now authorizes the airspace along with the waiver, which means it's a one-step process, a one-step review, and it's approved. So again, we've reduced a step in the process and given the authorizations. Now, as long as you're flying below the facility map grids, you're authorized to fly with this new COW.
Awesome. Thanks for clearing that up because, flying cows and such, I'm already having imagery of the movie Twister with your storm chasing and so on and the flying cows, but we'll see how the future goes. And
yeah, but they weren't authorized.
They were not authorized. And it was also a return flight by buzzing the tower.
That's right.
Love it. Well, hey, let's dive into a few other things here. With your decades of experience, you've seen the regulatory landscape evolve significantly. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced in advocating for drone integration into public safety, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I think what we saw across the board is that the first thing that drones were seen as were toys. And it was like, you've got the younger crowd that goes, hey, these are cool. Maybe some of the older crowd, people like me were saying, it's a toy. We don't need that toy here. It's just something else for me to have to mess with. Well, as we found out, as the drones started flying and started doing their missions, very shortly thereafter, when the drone wasn't there, the question was, where's the drone? Where's the drone? And then what we transitioned from is now reactive to proactive. So instead of getting to a call and calling for the drone, now there's an automatic response of drones to certain specific type of incidents. And so you can see everything from DFR, which launches automatically from the call and gets on the scene first, to tactical operations. And I think Skydio was doing something with a patrol-led division where the drone is launched from a vehicle and then picked up by a remote pilot someplace else. And so we're starting to see all these drones that are doing, and like I said, they're safer for everybody involved, better operational and more effective real-time situational awareness. And so now it's everybody starting to say, we have drones. And I never will forget, I'm going to throw his name out here because Tom Madigan was an undersheriff for Alameda County, one of the more progressive departments in California early on. And I was moderating a panel with him, and he got finished giving the presentation, showing all these different ways the drones were being used. And he said, now, for those of you that don't have drone programs, I'm just telling you, you're negligent. And that was it. Oh. And I did a presentation, started asking the question, would you ever go to an emergency incident and make decisions with your eyes closed? because I think that's what you're doing when you're not using a drone.
That's a great way to look at it. And honestly, in my career in drone, it's perspective, right? There's so much perspective, and not just even just like, oh, wow, that's what this looked like. It's like perspective of the situation, the situational awareness, all of it. And something we push so much at DroneSense and such is that whole perspective and awareness of everything going on, right?
And it continues to evolve as we start seeing that situational awareness, and then we see the tie-in with artificial intelligence, and then we start seeing like live 911, if you've heard about that, where they're playing, the officers in the field can actually hear the call come in. It's a dynamic changer because you're getting that perspective of what's that person like, what kind of situation are they in, what's their emotional state, are they really afraid, is there a real gun? Like if I tell you that I'm here and my spouse has a gun aiming at me, that's pretty clear. That's not like you don't know what's going on. So it's all these things. And now we're seeing some departments transitioning to full-time drone teams. FDNY has a full-time drone team. NYPD has a full-time drone team. And so we're seeing that. One of the things I think we still have to evolve into, really important though, is that we need to really start into this understanding that we're starting an aviation program. And we have to have an aviation safety culture because you're now a remote pilot in the national airspace. And we have to take the necessary steps that we're doing everything we can to fly safely, effectively, so that we can, one, maintain the public trust. Because that was one of the things we early on too, is one of the things we recommend that everybody do is make sure you do outreach programs with your community, go to town hall meetings, show it to the kids, take it to parent-teacher associations, let the moms and the dads and the kids all see it together, and then show some of the examples of what's happening and how it's making a difference and how you're going to protect their privacy. That with DFR, you're not videotaping when you're on the way to the call, you turn the video when you get there, or if you have it on, you're not looking at anything else except where you're headed. Because I remember the ACLU said, well, we don't want you to record when you're flying on your way there. Well, and then one of the things with Chula Vista made the point was, well, if we're not recording, how do you know what we're looking at? So it's best that we can actually hold people accountable to say, just look at where you're headed and then only use the camera in the direction of it when you get to the incident.
So Charles, you had mentioned working with the White House and the FAA and help push this new regulatory process forward. What was it like working across different levels of government and industry to make these changes happen?
Well, I think one of the things we saw with the new administration is the question of how effective are we as a government? And I think some of the things that we've been talking about over 11 months really started to resonate a little more, because the reality of trying to evaluate each and every emerging technology to determine if we're going to approve a DFR program with the great good that it does and the minimal risk that we know exists, it kind of came to that convergence of we need to switch gears. We see the risk is low. We've got statistics. We see the drones for good, how it's saving lives. We need to make that transition. So the White House was interested to see how things are working. And fortunately, that morning was the morning before my call with the White House and with the staffer at the White House. And one of the questions was, is the FAA supportive of public safety? And I was able to say, yes, let me give you an example of what just happened.
That's big. Now, how important is industry collaboration in moving the needle on these regulatory breakthroughs?
Well, I think industry collaboration, so that's why we have the Drones of First Responder Working Group, which is made up of agencies that have programs, agencies that are interested in programs, and industry. So we have DroneSense and Skydio and Aerodome and all these agencies, Axon, everybody represented so that we can learn from each other and industry can hear our challenges. And that we're also sending the same message to those people that make decisions at the FAA. So every one of these things that happen is not any one isolated area. It's all the collective of people. And I joke when I talk with the FAA and other people, I say there's a couple things you need to know about me. One, I'm a fire chief or firefighter by trade, so I'm used to knocking doors down and apologizing later. Second is I'm retired, so I don't really care if I upset you. Third, I'm not going away anytime soon. And the last thing is I've got an army of public safety behind me ready to call their members of Congress. So that's the power in the group. And then with industry, all of us looking to do the same thing and to get to the same place, to get this technology out in the hands of public safety, it's a win.
Yes. And this is a common theme of what discussed in a lot of these episodes too is community. And all of us need to continue to bring this community together. I mean, sure, there's competing entities and all this stuff like that, but we're all working the same direction, and we're all here to better public safety, to save lives, to create a better community, all of it. And the working group is one of the most excellent places to gather this kind of information. It's wonderful.
Well, and as progress is made, the FAA doesn't necessarily tell everybody the same thing at the same time. So as soon as a new change is taking place, it's like telegraph. It's like, everybody's on the line. It's like, new format, everybody. Have you all seen this? So then I'm calling and saying, what's the new form? And they're going, what do you mean? Well, I just got this from one of the departments. I just got the latest update. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's the two new forms. And I'm like, okay, good. And even in this evolution, it's still evolving. It's still important to understand it's still evolving, because if you do Part 107 DFR, you still have to get a separate authorization for airspace. So we're working on changing that. So let's just make it the same. But it's still evolving. And even in this first couple weeks, we saw from one CAL approved to another CAL approved, where they had changed from requiring monthly reporting to not requiring monthly reporting. So that's how fast things are continuing to change.
No, to add to your list of knocking down doors and so on, I feel that you're an influencer in this industry now, Charles. I love this. Did you think you would ever become that in your career?
I didn't even think I would be doing drones, period. So as many public safety, when you ask them, did you ever think you'd be doing this? And so if you ask Vern Salee or Fritz Reber and others, they'll say, yeah, I didn't really see this on the horizon, but it just kind of stood out.
All right. So faster approvals are essential and public safety is the priority. How do you ensure that streamlined processes doesn't compromise safety or the integrity of operations? And then what steps are being taken to balance these two factors?
Well, I think the key is, one, what does your ConOps look like? How are you operating beyond horizontal sight? How far are you flying? How high are you flying? And then if you're flying over people or over moving vehicles, what are you doing to mitigate it? And that mitigation is important both from flying in the airspace to what happens on the ground. So you'll see now, as we start seeing DFR, more requirements for parachutes. And that's also a trend that's occurring in Europe as well. And if you ask some of these people that have DFR programs, have you ever had a drone drop out of the sky? And the answer is yes. And I said, and what was that like? And they said, holding our breath. Because if you can think of one of these larger drones dropping on a child in a car seat or, a stroller, it's a really bad day. And the thing is, we have got to be doing this, as I said before, aviation safety culture, and doing what we can do to ensure we mitigate the emergencies. I've always said, similar to us when we drive emergency vehicles to our emergency incidents, we can drive faster, we can drive with red lights and sirens, we can go through stoplights, we can do all that, provided it's safe to do so. And I keep saying the important part here is it's not okay to kill one to save one. That doesn't work. And we've got to take care of our program, because as we make progress, we have to make sure that we do as much mitigation as we can so that we don't have that incident that puts us all on a full stop, which could happen.
Yeah, I don't even want to think about that. But this is us like sharing what in this community, new information and new procedures and new pieces of technology as well, and not siloing different sides of this and all kind of coming together.
Exciting time. It is a true convergence, and we are definitely saving lives. That more and more stories every day. I think we just saw one from Oklahoma City saving or finding a lost person.
I know what you're talking about. Yes. Now, this DFR COA breakthrough is exciting. What other advancements in drone technology or policy are you most excited about for the future of public safety operations?
Well, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, one of the things, the next step I see is the one-to-many, of making us being able to cover more areas with the same number of people. The second thing is now going into looking to swarm technology, to have swarms out looking for lost people over areas that can cover large areas, then combine that into artificial intelligence that can identify anomalies so that it can point things out to someone and put a pin on a map automatically to show this is where the anomalies are located that need to be checked for maybe a lost person or whatever it might be. I think that's the things that I'm looking at right now, because I think that artificial intelligence is going to add a whole lot to what we're looking at, because when you're flying within visual line of sight, what you're supposed to be doing is flying and looking at the drone. But most people are screen flyers. And so you're not really looking within visual line of sight. With going to this technology and the BVLOS stuff that we're doing now, that is going to change the dynamics of what we're doing. And I think that with that additional kind of analytical going on in the background as we're flying, need us to be looking at the screen as much. It may be actually pointing out now look at this. And we start zooming in and we start plotting things on a map. So search and rescue. The other thing that I want to say is the Part 107 DFR waiver also is good for non-public aircraft operation eligible agencies. So before, a non-governmental organization like search and rescue or volunteer fire departments couldn't do DFR and BVLOS, they can now under Part 107.
Do you think this will lead into greater acceptance of drone technology in everyday policy?
I think it will, because with all these smash and grabs and some other stuff, I know that Brookhaven, Georgia had some great examples of how they were flying, and you had people that were going in and doing regular thefts in places they were actually able to set up and catch the person as they came out of the store and follow them back and apprehend that particular suspect. And in Montgomery County, Maryland, their DFR program, they are the first agency, I believe, that used to make a conviction just on the drone footage itself.
That is correct. Yeah. Wild times, man. Like, it's just amazing watching this evolution occur. And I always thought it's not something that you just pick up a book and learn, oh, so this is drone. When this is drone regulation or policy or technology, it is constantly having a thirst for new information and what is current. And sometimes it changes daily, right?
Well, there's constant conversations about what's next. It's like we get through one door and I'm like excited, and then I'm getting that email or a call and say, okay, what about this? We're going to do this. I'm like, can we take a breath for a minute and just celebrate this success?
Sit at this vista for a moment. Let's take a view. Yeah, come on.
It's like, I don't want to go and start hammering them already. I'm going to give them, let's give them a week or two maybe. And then we can start going and say, okay, what about this next? And then I think the other exciting thing coming is Part 108 of the BVLOS rule. I've heard two different rumors. One, that this administration may just issue Part 108 and be done with it, and as opposed to doing a draft rule and then spending a year listening to comments and going back. So don't know what that's going to be, but we're hoping that Part 108 BVLOS rules will then eliminate the need for a lot more of the waivers that we've been dealing with, which would just really further expedite the process.
I love this. We have the rumor mill and everything, all getting excited about it. I mean, it's like, what's going to be the new iPhone? No. The rumor mill about the Part 108. Like, it's really exciting to be a part of this.
Well, some of the people have got the conspiracy theory that the only reason that we got some of these things that we got now is because they're going to be in Part 108 anyway. So they said, let's just go ahead and do it now. Now, I don't know if there's any truth to that or not, but the change from one mode to the next was pretty miraculous.
True. Well, Charles, to kind of close this up, and I've got two last questions for you. I mean, it's already been just a great conversation together. For one, now, you mentioned this a little bit about swarm technology and one of many and so on, but what developments do you hope to see in the next 5 or 10 years that further revolutionize this industry?
I think the holy grail is the detect and avoid capability on all the aircraft itself, so that it can detect what's out there and it can they can take actions to maneuver around each other so that we can avoid crashes. So I think that detect and avoid capability for everything that it might be flying is probably the holy grail.
I can see that. Charles, again, you've played such an influential role in integrating drones into public safety. Looking back at your career, what would you consider the most significant contribution to this field?
I think it's been learning and just becoming an advocate for the technology. How I got started was when I started seeing the interest, I started calling people that had stories early on. So I called Orange County. They were doing patrols on the oceans for shark patrols. And I asked to talk to the Marine captain at the time. He's like, are you with the FAA? I said, okay, I think he answered my first question. It was about their authorizations to fly, because they were flying one pilot to a certain point, and then the next pilot would pick it up and take it the rest of the way for the surf. And the second one I called Minneapolis, because I'd read a story about Minneapolis hazmat. And so I just started talking to everybody that had stories. And I suddenly became a subject matter expert by accident, because I started to see how other things were being used and talking to them about what they knew, what they didn't know, which is why I first started the National Council on Public Safety, UAS, which was basically designed to create a resource center for people. And I brought 30 national organizations together in 2 weeks. Good news is it was 30 national organizations. Bad news is it was 30 national organizations, and we were too early to come to any kind of consensus. And we couldn't enter into agreements and sponsorships and that kind of thing. So Drone Responders came about in 2019. And now has over 11,000 members, participation from 92 countries, and the largest resource center online. We do a monthly FAA webinar, and we put that on our YouTube channels. So all those discussions that we've had are there. So it's just been one path led me to another direction, and I just kind of followed the lead.
Nice. Well, and now if anyone wants to reach out to you or find more information, you mentioned the YouTube channel, you mentioned some working groups. What would you recommend those that want to reach out?
Well, first go to droneresponders.org and join. Then you'll get all the blogs and the updates and the breakthroughs like we just announced. And then if they want to speak specifically to me, they can reach out to me at charles@droneresponders.org. I receive probably about 20 emails a day now, and I'm probably taking 5 calls a day on, can you walk me through this new COWA process? And so I think what we're going to see is the process change. It's going to be so simple that we're just going to see these sort of clicking away. And then I'll get the calls and say, okay, Charles, what's next? Because public safety is never satisfied with what we have. We always have to have more.
Well, that's good. Keep that thirst, right?
That's right.
Well, Charles, you're such a thought leader in this industry. And I just got to say thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us and share your insights and so on. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you to you, our listeners, to DroneCast. Looking forward to the next one. We'll see you then. Take care. And that's a wrap for today's episode of DroneCast, rethinking public safety one drone at a time. I hope you found today's conversation insightful and thought-provoking. As always, we want to hear from you. What do you think of today's topics? Do you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes? Don't forget, you can reach out to us on LinkedIn at DroneCast, rethinking public safety one drone at a time, or head over to dronesense.com/DroneCast to share your thoughts and get more content from the show. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and sharing it with others who are passionate about the future of drones and public safety. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.